Hey there, my name is Wojciech and I'm one of the founders of ResearchLLM. ResearchLLM is a set of developer tools that allows you to build robust large language model applications. One of our demo projects is ResearchLLM, which is a tool that automates your statistical research and interpretation. ResearchLLM, for those who haven't seen the demo, allows you to send information about a data set without sharing the raw data itself to a large language model, have it analyze your data, and interpret the results as well from a statistical perspective. Here's a screenshot of ResearchLLM. In this case, we've loaded a data set from the US Census. This specific data set talks about income and has socio-demographic information about respondents, things like age, what kind of jobs they have, their educational backgrounds, marital status, occupation, etc. In this case, what I did was I asked a question around predicting the likelihood of being a high earner based on age. And you could see the results of ResearchLLM are pretty spectacular. In this case, it interpreted a linear model, a logistic model, a regression model, excuse me, specifically, and it showed that it interpreted the coefficient for the age variable in this case. Now, when it comes to ResearchLLM, I wanted to share a few links before I dive into the details around how ResearchLLM works. ResearchLLM is a set of dev tools. You could see us at ResearchLLM.com. We're open source. Everything's available on GitHub as well, and the link is below. And ResearchLLM is part of ResearchLLM, so you could actually see all the source code for ResearchLLM as well, if you're interested. Now, the goal behind ResearchLLM was to build an analysis tool solution that has a large language model analyze my data and do research for me, but doesn't actually have access to the data itself. As we all know, there's a lot of really sensitive data sets, and also the context window for a lot of large language models is simply too small to enable you to upload the entire data set itself and have it simply be analyzed with the raw data itself. Now, the long-term goal behind ResearchLLM is to have the large language model actually perform the entire research process for me, interpretation, report writing, etc. But we're starting at the very beginning, which is analyze the data itself. So again, you saw this screenshot before. We've got some really interesting US Census data, and we want to do some analysis. What I will walk you through today is the actual process that we use. Which prompts do we use? How do we chain the prompts themselves? The errors that we're looking for throughout the process, and how we actually make the ResearchLLM demo as robust as possible. So the very first thing to know is we have our local server. That's the web server that's serving the pages that you see the screenshots from. And we have the data there as well. Now, the very first thing that we do is we have a startup prompt that specifically tells the large language model that they're a data science helper. They don't need to qualify their responses with things like as an AI model. I want them to be concise. And also, if they are generating a code block, which we're expecting them to do so in every case almost, we want them to do so with only one code block. So the idea here is it makes it easier for us to take the code and run it locally because we don't have to take multiple code blocks and merge them into one. We end the prompt by asking the large language model, does it understand? And to specifically write yes and only yes if it does. One of the things that I find is when providing a set of complex questions or instructions to an LLM like this, it's really, really helpful to have it simply start by saying yes, because when I'm testing or exploring different LLMs, sometimes they won't answer yes, sometimes they'll get confused, and getting through the startup prompt is already the very first challenge. Now, in our case, for this demo here, we're using Claude, which is Anthropic's large language model. And the really nice thing that you can see here is, did it understand? The answer is yes, and it did so in the first attempt. One of the things that we also do with ResearchLLM here is we provide exception classes to capture issues or errors around large language models understanding responses or understanding instructions like this. And in this specific case, we actually allow ourselves to submit the instructions 3 times before completely erroring out and not even launching the web server itself. So in this case, really nice. Claude understood our instructions in the first attempt. And so now we're running a Flask server, in this case, serving the ResearchLLM website. So this is what we'd get without having analyzed any data yet. Now, the next thing that we do is we have a data prompt. And in this screenshot, you see that over here. This data prompt or data overview prompt basically provides all of the metadata information to the large language model, what variables we have and what are some of the values or types of variables that they represent, and also what packages can be used for statistical analysis. You'll notice here I've imported pandas, numpy, scipy, sklearn, and of course I've loaded the data set itself into a data frame called df. And so this is what you see here. The data prompt itself has that data setup intro. In this case, what am I researching? The environment that we've used, and then we have a function called generate overview in ResearchLLM that specifically generates a data set overview for the data frame that we want to analyze. And finally, we have a question. So going back to here, when you ask a question, we replace obviously the question placeholder in the prompt here with the question that you've submitted. So this could be something like, what is the correlation between age and income? Can you tell me what the likelihood of being a high earner based on age is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the data prompt. This is what we ultimately submit. And then a few things happen. The result that you actually see in the ResearchLLM output is actually the result of multiple prompts going back and forth between the large language model and the server, the ResearchLLM server itself. So the first thing that we do in the process is we ask it to generate Python code. The second thing that we do is we run the code itself. So the data prompt that you saw before generates the Python code, and then we run it. And there's a few really specific things here that PhaseLLM allows you to do. The first is we have a code execution agent. This takes the actual Python code that was generated and it runs it locally. We also track the errors here if there are any. Now, hopefully there won't be any errors, but you never know. And when it comes to error tracking, we specifically have an LLM code exception class that we've written, and this provides information that allows us to update prompts or resubmit them in different ways. And the chatbot class that we actually use also allows us to do some really interesting things in terms of resubmitting prompts with additional information without actually treating it as a full new message. Because one of the things, again, that we found as we've run different tests around ResearchLLM, actually removing parts of the message from before and rerunning the message as if the old message never took place actually works a lot better. So when it comes to running the code, in this case, we'll iterate once. If there's an error, we'll update the prompt, resubmit it to the chatbot, and then try it one more time. If that doesn't work, then we completely error out. But of course, you can update the code to do this multiple times or to even use multiple models if you'd wish. Now, once the code has run, we have the outputs of the code itself, right? And so then we have another prompt, which in this case provides the code output to the model and asks it to interpret it. Now, this is a pretty simple analysis prompt. It's literally what you see here. The following is the output of the code that we just ran, of course. Here's the code output. Could you please interpret this for me? Justify your answer by including the outputs of the analysis. And so in this case, whatever we get here is the final chat output, and that's what you actually see in ResearchLLM. So this 5-step process, data prompt, Python code, run the code, potentially resubmit the code, submit an analysis prompt, and then provide the final chat output, is the process that drives the seeming one-to-one interaction with ResearchLLM, the ResearchLLM user, and the large language model itself. Now, the other really, really cool thing about this process is that the large language models are actually very good at interpreting things that aren't actually queries directly, and interpreting them into code and actually addressing whatever assumptions the user had. So in this case, I have a joke query. I bet married people work less. What you actually see here is the large language model actually still converted this into the specific query around understanding that working less looks at the number of hours, and also in this case it does an additional split around high income versus low income groups, which is quite interesting. And of course the conclusion is that no, married people actually work the same or more in some cases. So that's ResearchLLM in a very quick nutshell. Again, all of the code is available at phasellm.com and in our repository. We're going to continue working on the ResearchLLM demo project as well, and there's a few things that we'll be adding. We'll be adding chain of thought reasoning. We'll be adding other agents so that you could actually do further research beyond simply code execution. We're looking into adding memory as well, so that as new insights are discovered and found, those insights can be referenced with future models. And the real ultimate goal behind everything here with the demo is research automation and new knowledge creation. We believe that large language models can be wonderful research assistants, and we're really excited to show that this is the case. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback or queries about what we're doing, don't hesitate to reach out. My email is w@phaseai.com. Thank you so much for listening.